I chose that song, this last song, because it's sort of the underlying theme of my decision to take a break from ministry 6 months ago when I had been coming here on a regular basis, and I felt like I needed to reestablish my own internal compass. And I'm talking about a directionless direction within my own heart. And so it's been about 6 months since I've done this, other than when I was here 2 weeks ago. And I thought I would share with you a little bit of my process. I never know, a minister never knows where someone is on their spiritual path, and there's some level of trust that what you share will be useful to somebody. So hopefully there's one person in the room that will get something from this, and maybe more. But I've always been the kind of person who was very suspect of anything that sounded too slick, too canned, too well prepared, and I actually think that the young generation today has a lot of that too. That there's a need for authenticity, walking your talk. I think that religion has gotten a bad name in part because a lot of the messages that were given and were professed to be the truth were not really owned by the mouth that was sharing it. And we can tell, can't we? Because we don't just listen with our ears. I can't say that in church, but there's such a thing as a BS meter that fires off, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that someone is being intentionally insincere, but it's just that they haven't sort of made the internal connection between the message that they're sharing and their own personal experience. And so that was sort of what was happening for me. And after doing this work for 25 years, I had developed, a skill set and an ability to articulate these teachings in a way that could convince you that I was walking my talk as well as talking my talk, In other words, you can get away with it. But I didn't get into ministry in order to be insincere and disconnected from the truth of who I am. I got into ministry so that I could have a more authentic relationship with the truth and then share that. So when I decided 6 months ago that I needed to step away from this role, it was there was a very strong feeling in me that something was shifting in my understanding of the truth, of God, of spirituality. And that I hadn't really taken the inkling of what that was pointing to as far as it could go. And so I was sort of like, living in this, it's like the Israelites, they get freed out of Egypt and then they're on their way to the promised land. But in the meantime, they're in the desert, the wilderness experience. And that's kind of what I felt like, that sort of that liminal period between where you've been and the sense of where you're going, but you haven't arrived yet. And so I was sort of feeling like unset jello, just sort of sloshing around in my mind and my heart, what I felt to be the truth. And I thought, well, you all deserve better than that, and I deserve to stand in my own confidence of what I share, and not be a snake oil salesman, selling something that I don't believe. I mean, we can all parrot. We probably do that, from time to time. And parroting is, of course, you repeat something that you've heard, right? So I felt that I needed to do this work in private. And so I've been doing that over the last 6 months or so. And what I discovered in that time was that for most of my spiritual life, which of course is 24/7, but the time when I started looking into spirituality sincerely, which was about 30 years ago, I was absorbing these teachings through my mind. I was using my mind to understand the concepts of spirituality. And so, for example, in unity, the one major premise is there's only one presence and one power in the universe, the good, omnipotent. And I can understand that conceptually, and I can even understand how that's so vast, right? But I was not experiencing my own sense of oneness. In other words, it's one thing to say there's only one presence and one power in the universe, and then go about your life feeling like there's you, and then there's the world, and then there's everyone else, and there's you, and there's all of these notions of separation, fragmentation. We're still operating so highly in my consciousness that I realized that I was saying one thing, but I wasn't feeling it. You get me? You feel me? Yeah? And that's a very uncomfortable place to be if you're standing up in front of people, because, for the reason I started out by saying, being authentic, we deserve to, you don't need to share anything that you don't truly know. But I didn't feel like getting up and just saying, I don't know anything. Let's go take an offering, Go read your scriptures and your books and everything. I have nothing to tell you. I just felt like that's probably not going to sell, really well. So I carried on. And there's always that feeling that, maybe if I prayed a little harder, if I lengthened my meditations, if I found a better book and found a better teacher, And of course, the internet now is full of teachers. There is no shortage of spiritual food out there, folks. In fact, the fact that you even show up on a Sunday is testament to your own commitment to community, because there is certainly lots of inspiration for free out there. But what I realized I was doing is I had taken on my own sense of self and tried to spiritualize it. I don't know if that rings true for any of you, but there's a difference between when we say, I am a child of God, or I am divine. There's a difference between saying that and even understanding how that is and how that could be true, and having an actual experience of that sense of oneness. And I realized that because I was able to comprehend these principles, I never took them any farther than my head. Does anyone get what I'm saying here? Oh, good, more than one. I was hoping for more than one. So I've always been a rational-minded person, and that's why I liked unity, because unity isn't the kind of teaching where you have to leave your mind at the door, where you have to just take everything on faith, and some of it sounds really hard to believe because it's rooted in some very fundamental interpretations of stories that seem completely incredible, right? And so I liked unity because unity doesn't ask us to take anything literally. It invites us to take these principles and see if they're true for us. That's the invitation. It's not imposed upon us. It's offered, like the food that we have here in the back of the fellowship room. You don't have to eat it, And we're not making no promises that if you eat it, you're going to become enlightened or something, or have indigestion for that matter. We assume that you will make the choices according to your own guidance, and that you will consume, according to your own sensibilities. So I love that about unity, but because I found myself very quickly becoming a minister, and I don't know how that happened so quickly, but it did. I hadn't had a lot of time to even really process my own spiritual development. So a lot of this remained conceptual for me. And then I became a minister, and it was like every Sunday, here it comes. You got to have a talk. You have to be inspirational. You got to be funny. You have to be inspiring. You have to be loving. You have to be compassionate. There's quite a call if you try to fit into that mantle of what it means to be a minister. And I was in some larger communities and tons of people and tons of demands on my time and counseling and finance committee meetings and all of that. And I just got all swept up in it. And I actually didn't spend a whole lot of time to go inside and find my God. And so this is shameless self-disclosure right here. But since my prior board presidents aren't in the room, so when I came here, and I had been out of ministry for about 1.5 years or so, I said, oh, I can do this. And I need to make some money. A very pragmatic reason, I need to make some money. I can do this. I've done this for 25 years. But what I hadn't accounted for was that because I have I went through, well, I don't want to go through this whole story, but I went through a life-changing experience a couple of years ago. I nearly died, okay? And when I came out of that, my need for sincerity and truth-telling and authenticity had just took another notch up. And I couldn't stand the sound of anything that I felt was not owned as truth. So I became much more sensitive to my ability to fake it, so to speak. And I don't mean faking it that I didn't have a belief in these teachings, but I don't know if you get this, but there's a difference between belief and knowing. You can cop a belief, right? You can say, yeah, and sometimes just out of your desire, you can hold on to something and you can profess it. But it's another matter, and this is where maybe you could call it intuition. Intuition is something that you may not even have the rational explanation for why you know something, but you just know. You just know, and I think it's more of a feminine quality. I mean, we all have it, but I think it tends to be more feminine. And my relationship with my wife for many years, she would just say like, "No, this is right," and I'd go, "Tell me why," and I'd want all the reasons, and she would just go, "I don't have those reasons that will probably satisfy that critical thinking mind of yours, but I can tell you that this is very strong guidance that I know this to be true." So this is, when you take that standard that my spirituality needs to be something that I know, you may end up discarding a whole bunch of beliefs that you had before. In fact, when I was in ministerial school, they encouraged you to subject everything to doubt. Take everything that you believe and subject it to doubt. Because whatever is not true will be revealed. And that's what's going to, you don't want that in your credo of beliefs, right? You don't want what's not true to be that which you're holding on to. So hold everything loosely, right? And what you will find is that what remains when you give up everything that is suspect, everything that is not, that does not seem to be absolutely true in your heart, will be lost. It's like, you know, you're flying at 40,000 feet and someone opens the hatch, you know, and everything that's not tied down gets sucked out, right? So that happened to me in ministerial school, and that was a wonderful process. Well, that was 25 years ago. And so it's sort of what happened again when I decided that I needed to step away here, was I needed to get away and find out what is really true. What do I know to be true? What is truth? I mean, just the basic, what is truth? Certainly the world can't give us what is truth, because everything in the world changes, right? And truth is that which does not change. It's the same today and tomorrow, and it doesn't rise and fall with circumstances, or whether she loves me or she loves me not, or whether I have money or I'm poor. None of those things affect the truth. And then so this whole question of who am I, which is, you know, the existential question that we're all invited to ask ourselves. When I would ask that question, who am I couldn't get past the temporary versions of myself. And I had I could say, oh, well, I'm a child of God. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. I could say those things. But I really, in my heart, I just felt like I was a human being hoping for a spiritual experience. So I guess to sum this up is really to say that for most of my ministry life, most of my adult life, I've been a seeker, but not a finder until recently. And now I'm still, I think that jello is starting to set a little bit, but it's still pretty amorphous, and I'm not ready to make a strong and compelling statement of my faith. But I am releasing any need to know, except when I share. I wrote an article last week for my blog, and it sort of was an expose on how I've been sort of giving a lot of lip service to these teachings over the years, and I don't feel guilty about that. I just feel like that it was my evolutionary journey that we're all on. So I thought I'd share that with you, and so if none of this has really landed in some sort of coherent way, this hopefully will. It's called The End of Seeking. If you were like me or any other typical spiritual seeker, you've probably felt frustration along this seeming path to spiritual awakening, wondering when, if ever, you will spiritually awaken. What underlies such frustration is an unexamined assumption, which is there is some state of mind or heart, some cosmic experience that has thus far eluded us. That if we would only follow some particular path or discipline, we would be rewarded with a breakthrough. This is tantamount to finding the light at the end of the tunnel, an assumption that what we are seeking is apart from us, separated by time and space. The way the surface or ego mind operates has us dependent upon principles of materiality. And it is through this lens that we conclude that what we yearn for is clearly not here, not now. We look for an objective experience, don't we? We're the subject and we're looking for an object. Even in our spiritual life, we think, okay, there's me, and then there's God, or there's truth. And that dichotomy, we maintain that when we're using our surface mind. And then we've all heard these dramatic stories of spiritual realization, the mystical happenings, the deja vu moments, and seeing apparitions, telepathic communications, even beholding divine beings. And I had a friend who began having regular nightly visits where Jesus was standing at the foot of his bed. And he wondered whether he was getting close to his spiritual awakening. And that was many, many years ago, and he's still seeking. Maybe you are too. I was too until very recently. The seeming difficulty and the rarity of spiritual awakening is oxymoronic. That is, it's the extreme simplicity of spiritual reality. It's objectless, spaceless, timeless presence that eludes our normal perceptual way of noticing. We look out from a sense of being a separate self, a separate subject looking for an external object. And in this dualistic mode, we cannot perceive what is not apart from us at any distance. Remember Jesus correcting his disciples when they asked when the kingdom of God would come. And he said it would not come with observation. Rather, it was already before them and within them. And how many times have I heard that? And have you heard that? And yet have we looked? No. What they were seeking, the Father had already given them. Even in prayer, he said, when you pray, believe that you have already received, and it will be yours. That doesn't grok with the mortal mind. What do you mean, I've already received? I can tell you right now, I'm not happy. I'm not peaceful. I'm not prosperous. I can give you a whole list of what I'm not. So what do you mean, Jesus, that I've already received? Until we sincerely ask and penetrate into the question, what is already and always present? What is already and always present? Truth will elude us. While we're in the midst of seeking, we are essentially practicing the absence rather than the presence. In every experience, regardless of the content, there is a simultaneous element that is overlooked. And what is that? When we're looking, and we're looking out, and we're noticing whatever we're noticing, the objects of our perception, there's an element that we overlook. What is that? Say, yes, not the perceivers so much as perceiving, because there is no perceiver. Without the presence of awareness, the other word for that is consciousness, yes? There can be no perception. No experience is possible. Awareness is prior to and thus most primary and fundamental to reality. As St. Francis is quoted as saying, what's looking is what we're looking for. What's looking? Because we are so conditioned to material reality, we assume that whatever God is or what we are must be some form that can be seen and described with definable, observable qualities. And that's why we don't find it. But such observables are only the evidence within perception, the content of experience, not the pure capacity for knowing itself. This recognition eludes us because it is closer than breath. Jesus said, closer than hands and feet and breath. And in the Quran it says, closer than your neck vein. This that we're looking for, it's not an object that can be perceived by some separate subject. And that's why we don't see it, because we're so used to looking for something that's objectively perceivable. But it's like if right now I said to you, okay, you are it. What you're looking for is you, not the body, not the mind. I mean, your essence. And you said, yeah, but how do I find it? And I said, okay, well, just stand up and take a step towards yourself. What? You can't get any closer to you. But you can turn this focus of attention. We are so gifted at looking outwardly and do what? Turn around. That's what Jesus was talking about when he said, when the disciples, when will the kingdom come? The kingdom, it's the Father's good pleasure to have given you the kingdom. It's already established. And he said, you say 4 more months and then comes the harvest, and I say the fields are already ripe, baby. It's yours, it's now. And the only thing that we can find that's here now is consciousness. It's awareness. And I don't know how I missed that. Even though I heard it 1,000 times. Jesus also told the story of the prodigal son, and Jesus was so good at shocking people with the truth. Because he tells this story of the son who is unbelievably ungrateful, right? Who says, give me half of my inheritance now, not after you pass, but now, because I want to go, I got some living to do. And he goes out and he spends all his money in riotous living. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, we get it. Okay. And comes to himself. And he realizes he would be better off at home. And the purpose of Jesus telling the story is not to highlight some sinful behavior of this man, but to emphasize that he realized that he needed to turn around and go back home, because what he was looking for, that he thought the world would give him, he had all along. What a powerful, beautiful way. And of course, it shocks people because, of course, the people of his time would say, no, respectable father or son would do that. And then if he did do that, the father would disown him. And so Jesus reveals that you can screw up, but you're never going to be thrown out of the kingdom. You're always going to be welcome at the table. Because you can't separate yourself from who and what you are, which is divine. And when we know that, we're free. We don't have to act out. If we all grew up with unconditional love and knowing that we were loved beyond condition, I imagine it might have affected our behavior, do you think? Just a theory. So I'll finish this up, and then we'll do a little meditation. When we turn the light of knowing away from the objects of experience towards its own essence, which is awareness itself, all that has obscured our true nature is seen through, and the very peace and happiness that it previously sought in objective experience is made plain. This is such a huge paradigm shift in understanding the source of our well-being. Until this truth becomes fully realized, our mind spins a maelstrom of thinking and strategizing, hoping and praying for some better day when we'll be graced with happiness. And now that we realize that happiness is at the very heart of our being, we see it no longer as something to be acquired, but to be revealed. In deference to the truth and full disclosure, it can be asserted that all of our many practices and disciplines towards spiritual realization are not necessary, except in conceding to the separate self story of what is missing or broken in our experience. These practices may eventually wear away the obscuration of the truth that what we are looking for is here within us, as it has been all along. So I invite you to take a deep breath with me. This has been a lot to take in. And let it out. We understand when we think about Jesus, the spiritual teacher, minister, that he would be in service to people and he would be sharing these life-changing teachings, but then he would be imposed upon as well by the crowds, and he needed to go away. And so he would go up into the mountains and go apart a while and pray and restore his connection, his knowing of the truth, that he was indeed a spiritual being, carrying on this human divine ministry. And we realize that this, regardless of our occupation or our role in life, is so important for us to spend time to close the door from the outer world, to go in the closet and shut out the world, and to seek the awareness of this that is always with us. We can call it any name. It cannot be limited or altered or delayed by the names we call it. Awareness is more of an Eastern term, consciousness. The simple knowing that we have this capacity to be aware, and that that's primary in us. Anything that you perceive is only possible because you have this capacity to be aware. Right now, just notice whatever you're aware of, and then notice how is it that you are aware? How is it that you know anything that you know? And put your attention on that awareness, that which knows. Everything that we hold to be true in life reports first to this part of us. And the only thing that is always present and is undeniable is that we are conscious, aware beings. Our bodies change, we see that. We can change our names, we can change occupations, we can change partners, we can even change genders. But this isness of being is the same as it was when we were 5 years old and 10 years old and 40 years old. The I am that you are. And this I am is not personal. Because what is the limit of awareness? Can you find a limit, a boundary where awareness stops? Look and see. All that we have taken ourselves to be all can be perceived by this awareness. So what must we be? If we can be aware of our bodies and our minds and our stories and our relationships and our work and our money and our circumstances, then we must not be those things, because there is that of us that knows these things. Mustn't it be primary? So the invitation of spiritual growth and enlightenment is to recognize what we are most essentially. To be aware of being aware. To be conscious of being conscious. This is the kingdom of God. This is the secret place of the Most High. This is nirvana. This is Kensho. This is our natural state. And it can never leave us, because it is us. We can lose everything, but we can't lose the truth that we are. This is a journey without distance to a home we never left. So it is. Namaste. Amen.